Once upon a time, in a vast countryside where the summer sun ruled the skies with merciless fire, there lived a clever and determined crow. The season had been cruel that year, not a drop of rain had fallen for months. The ponds had turned to dust, and the once green fields now lay cracked and lifeless under the scorching heat. The animals of the forest had begun to wander far and wide in search of water, many perishing along the way. Among them was this black-feathered crow, whose sharp mind was his greatest strength. One blazing afternoon, as the heat waves shimmered across the earth, the crow flew through the dry air, his wings growing heavier with every beat. His tongue felt like sandpaper, his throat burned like fire, and his heart thumped weakly from exhaustion. He had not drunk a single drop of water in days. Below him stretched miles of barren land, dry fields, shriveled trees, and dusty paths that led nowhere. The rivers had turned into lines of cracked mud, and even the wind felt tired. The crow cawed softly to himself, "Is this how my life will end, in thirst under this cruel sun?" He longed for the sweet coolness of a forest stream or even a puddle of rainwater, but the world below offered no mercy. Yet even in his weakness, his spirit refused to give up. Somewhere deep inside him, he carried a spark of hope that whispered, "Keep going. Where there's a will, there's a way." As he flew, something glimmered faintly in the distance, a tiny reflection of sunlight bouncing off something smooth. Squinting through the glare, the crow's heart leapt with hope. Water, he thought eagerly. He pushed his tired wings harder, following that flicker of light until he came upon an old, forgotten hut at the edge of a desolate field. In front of the hut stood a dusty clay pitcher, tall and narrow, half buried in the ground. The crow landed beside it, panting heavily, his feathers ruffled from the heat. He hopped up to the rim and looked inside. His heart nearly sang with joy. There at the very bottom was water. It sparkled faintly in the sunlight, but when he tried to dip his beak, it was too deep, far out of reach. He leaned in, stretching his neck as far as he could, but his beak barely grazed the inner wall of the pitcher. He tried again and again, but it was useless. His excitement quickly turned into frustration. The crow jumped down and tried to tilt the pitcher over, using his claws and beak, pushing with all his might, but it was too heavy. He fluttered his wings, shoved with his body, even tried pulling at its edge, but the thick clay vessel would not move. Tired, defeated, and panting from exhaustion, he sat beside it in the shadow of the hut. The heat beat down mercilessly. For a long moment he just sat there silently, staring at the water that he could not drink. So close. Yet so far, he thought bitterly. His throat ached and his eyes strung. He could almost hear the mocking hiss of the hot wind swirling around him. But even in that moment of despair, the clever crow refused to surrender. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, and thought, "No, I cannot give up now. There must be a way, there's always a way." He began to look around carefully, letting his sharp eyes scan every inch of the dry earth. Scattered around the pitcher were small pebbles and stones, left behind by time and wind. An idea sparked in his quick mind like lightning. "If I can't reach the water," he murmured to himself, "perhaps I can make the water come to me." Excitement returned to his tired body. Without wasting a second, he picked up a small pebble in his beak and dropped it into the pitcher. He heard a tiny splash as the pebble sank to the bottom. He peered inside. The water had risen, but only a little. Still, it worked. Encouraged, he picked up another pebble and dropped it in. Then another and another. Each time the water rose a little higher. The crow's heart filled with renewed determination. "Yes," he cawed, "this will work, I just have to keep going." He began to work tirelessly, picking up stones of every size and shape, carrying them one by one to the pitcher. With every pebble he dropped, the water crept closer to the top. The hours passed and the sun began to tilt westward, casting long shadows across the land. The crow was drenched in sweat, his feathers were dusty and his beak sore from the weight of the stones. But his spirit was stronger than his fatigue. He didn't stop. He didn't complain. He just kept going. As the pile of remaining pebbles grew smaller, the water in the pitcher climbed higher and higher until at last it reached the brim. The crow looked inside and saw his reflection shimmering on the surface of the water, a tired, dusty but victorious bird. With a cry of joy, he dipped his beak into the cool water and drank deeply. The first gulp felt like heaven. The second brought life back into his body. With every sip, he felt strength returning to his wings, clarity returning to his mind. He closed his eyes in gratitude and whispered softly, "Thank you, God. Thank you for giving me the will to think, to try, and not to give up." When he had quenched his thirst, the crow hopped onto the edge of the pitcher, looking out at the glowing horizon. The burning sun had begun to soften into shades of orange and gold, painting the sky with beauty. The crow spread his wings and let the warm wind flow through his feathers. He felt free, not just because he had survived, but because he had learned something precious. He realized that every obstacle, no matter how impossible it seems, hides a lesson in patience, courage, and intelligence. It is never strength alone that wins the battle, but determination guided by wisdom. As the crow prepared to fly again, he looked back once more at the pitcher full of pebbles and water. That simple clay pot had taught him one of life's greatest truths, that where there's a will, there's always a way. He cawed loudly, a proud sound that echoed across the empty fields, as if to announce his victory to the world. Then he soared into the open sky, his wings slicing through the golden light of sunset, his heart light and joyful. As he flew over the land, the cool breeze of evening brushed against him, whispering softly through the air, carrying his story far and wide. In time, the tale of the clever crow spread across villages and towns. Parents told it to their children as they tucked them into bed. Teachers shared it with students to remind them of the power of problem solving. Travelers told it around campfires to give hope to those facing hard times. And every time someone heard it, they remembered that perseverance can turn weakness into strength, and intelligence can turn failure into triumph. The crow became a symbol of resilience, patience, and cleverness, proof that success is born not from luck, but from effort and the refusal to give up. Years later, when children looked up at the sky and saw a crow flying freely, their elders would smile and say, "There goes the bird who taught the world a lesson, never give up." The phrase, "where there's a will, there's a way," became a timeless truth, passed down through generations, reminding everyone that even in the hardest moments, hope and effort can create miracles. The story lived on, not just as a tale for children, but as wisdom for all. Because life, like that picture, often holds what we seek, just out of reach. And only those who dare to think, to act, and to persist will find a way to reach it. So whenever you face challenges, remember the thirsty crow. Remember his struggle, his cleverness, his faith in himself. Remember how he turned defeat into victory, not through luck, but through perseverance. For even when the world seems dry and cruel, and the odds seem impossible, your mind and your will can be the tools that lift the water to your lips. The crow's journey reminds us all that nothing is truly out of reach if we refuse to stop trying. And so, the crow's spirit still soars in the hearts of dreamers, whispering through every challenge we face, keep going, believe in yourself, and never forget. Where there's a will, there's always a way.